Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fire 5 at Phoenix. So, my name is Zoe Thompson. I am with Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching. This series is Fire 5 at Phoenix, a very simple concept. I do like to keep things simple. I have a guest each week. Today, my guest is Kevin. Kevin's going to introduce himself in a moment. So to have a guest each week, that guest brings 5 questions on the topic. And this month, our topic is beliefs. So in a moment, when Kevin has had a chance to say hello, he will start with his questions. I haven't seen them. I'll get to answer them and we'll have some conversation around it and hopefully some interesting and meaningful conversation for people tuning in. So Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about Big Dog, Little Dog too.
Sure, thanks Zoe, and good afternoon everyone. As Zoe says, my name is Kevin Moore. I'm one half of this tiny social enterprise called Big Dog, Little Dog. Why are we called that? First of all, our services, we have what we like to call our Big Dog services, which are high energy, enjoyable training sessions, webinars, presentations around the subject of mental health. And then the Little Dog services, which are the more subtle consultancy services that we do, helping employers make workplaces more mental health friendly. We're also called Big Dog, Little Dog because there are 2 of us. Bob, my partner in crime, is the little dog. People ask, so how little is a little dog? And he's 5'8", which is fairly respectable to most people. Yeah. But in my family, we have like 10-year-olds of that height. So I'm the big dog, and I like to refer to myself as 5'20". It doesn't sound quite as odd as 6'8". We spend most of our time delivering things like mental health first aid. Really proud to say as well that September last year, we were a cornerstone of launching England's first ever short qualifications in suicide awareness and suicide prevention. So we do a lot of work around that.
Oh, so important. Such an important piece of work. And so I did my mental health first aider training last year. And it's even with my background and even with what I knew and what I thought I knew, there was still so many gaps in my knowledge that course was able to fill. So for somebody who hasn't had any sort of experience or dealings with mental health or training on mental health, they're great courses, aren't they? And they're not aimed at, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but they are aimed at everybody. So you can support family members, you can support colleagues. They are aimed at increasing that awareness and increasing that that information that we need to be able to help and support people, right?
Yeah, very much a layperson's course. But what I always find fascinating, I've had psychologists on the course who at the end have said how much they've learned. 2 weeks ago, I had a neurologist on the course who said he learned a lot. So fascinating course to deliver, and they go down really well. One other thing I should also mention, Zoe, before we get underway, there is a littlest dog, and she is in here with me today. So if anybody does see this little ball of fur down below here, that's Holly. She'll settle down.
Not the official little dog, the extra additional little dog. Well, we had a little person pop up last time, so if we haven't had a little dog pop up yet, but we have had little people pop up. So the more the merrier. I'm quite happy. So it's all good.
Great.
So shall we get started? I'm intrigued as to what questions you've brought today.
Yeah, so interesting subject, beliefs, and of course, there's such a broad area to talk about. I thought, why don't we focus in on a couple of the areas that become very pertinent when you look at the subject of mental health specifically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can take you out of your comfort zone a bit, Zoe. I'm going to take us to 2 belief-based models and ask you a couple of questions on each. We'll have a look at this thing called frame of reference, a couple of questions on that, and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions around unconscious bias.
Cool.
Are you ready for me?
I am as ready as I will ever be.
Good. Well, for anyone tuning in, just a brief explanation if you've not heard this phrase frame of reference before. It's a psychology-based model. And when we talk about our frame of reference, what we're talking about is our entire portfolio of values and beliefs that you've been creating and building on since the day you were born. And it's a fundamental part of any good mental health training because your frame of reference is the thing that you judge the rest of the world against day in, day out. So understanding your frame of reference is an absolute starting point for mental health training. So the first question, Zoe, for you is, if you think about your own frame of reference, looking back over life, and this doesn't have to be right back to childhood, wherever you like, if you had to say 3 people who are fundamental in creating the frame of reference that is yours today, who would you pick?
3 individuals. That's interesting, because I definitely have sort of 3 areas. It's whether or not I can pick 3 individuals from that. I think individuals would be quite hard, actually. If I'll start with the kind of the 3 areas, and we'll see if we can pick out some individuals in that. So there's obviously growing up, childhood, parents, and schooling and things like that. So, you know, just all of the things that you are aware of, and you think, when you hear yourself saying things, you think, where did that come from? Who's helped shape that? So, you know, it was certainly from, you know, a standard family, really. You know, there wasn't, I think we were brought up not really anything. So interesting, brought up in a Christian home. But then I married a Muslim. So there was definitely in terms of opening my world up as to a whole set of other religious beliefs, but culture, way of life, things that were important to different people at that time. So I think that shaped, that was one shape of it. My time in employment with the police, again, that's another culture, a very set way of sort of very, I want to say pigeonhole things that, you know, like, does it fit in with this? Does it fit in with that? Sort of very certain ways of approaching things, seeing things. And then I think as a parent, I think things have changed as a parent. I think I've probably challenged more beliefs and more things that I felt were true, or that I believed to be true, as I've experienced life as a parent. So that's still not 3, is it? So this is really hard to narrow down to individuals. So I think my son is a nice, easy option, in that obviously he's 18 now. So that's 18 years of being part of somebody's growth, and how you are empowering your child to learn and understand and see the world through their own eyes. And I think you become more aware of your own beliefs, and whether there's certain beliefs you want to pass on, and whether there's certain beliefs that you want them to experience and grow. So I think my son has definitely helped me to be a more critical thinker, to challenge some of the things that I've felt were in my belief system, but I think also really strengthened some of them as well. So, okay, so we've got 1, my son. I think 2 individuals, that's really hard for me. So really hard to narrow it down to individuals, because I think there's lots of individuals in there. Who's really helped? Okay, I'm not going to name names, but there was one individual when I was working who was always what I would call the wind in my sail, was always the person who encouraged me to step forward, who encouraged me to find a voice, who was really, really supportive. When I had self-limiting beliefs, there was one individual who very much challenged my perspective, challenged the things that I was saying in a very nurturing and supportive way. So we have that individual. So that's 2. What would be a 3rd one?
If it helps, why don't you have a little think about what are your values and beliefs, and then see if you can trace it back and say, who or where did that come from?
So my values, because they're written on the wall here, my values are about making a difference, positivity, and continuous improvement. And I think a lot of those have been shaped by my experiences, and there have been individuals that have been a part of that. But I think it's been more about how I have moved through some of those experiences, what's taken me from where I was to where I wanted to get to. And that's been a theme, but it's also a theme of why I wanted to work with the police in the first place. I wanted to make the difference, and the continuous improvement is definitely about my drive and determination. But also in coaching work now, it is about making a difference. It's about being a positive part of people's journey and helping them to make continuous improvement from where they are to where they want to get to. So I think there probably is a third individual in there. Okay, there is a third individual in there who will also remain nameless, and probably because the impact was probably so with this individual, the impact was that because of the way they were, I know that in that time, in that period of time in my life, I allowed that person to influence and not change, but I didn't feel that I could stand true to what I believed in. I didn't feel that I could stay true to my values. I definitely, for a period of time, did not live in alignment with what was important to me and my values. So I think this individual would influence in terms probably from it challenged. I know what it feels like to not live in alignment with my values. I know what it's like to live in that space where you are influenced and it has that impact of that overwhelming sense of, this is not who I want to be anymore. Who have I become? I don't like who I've become. So I think this individual helped to shape it by trying to remove it. So I had to fight for what was important. And then in terms of moving forwards, I had to challenge myself of what I wanted to leave behind and what I wanted to take with me. So I fully appreciate that's a very cryptic answer, because two of those people have been nameless, but they've both been very influential, but in very different ways.
I think that last example you gave is a really powerful one, because it shows how some people impact your frame of reference by stirring or awakening a value within you.
Yeah.
And sometimes in life we need absence in order to realize the thing that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I'll accept that, even if you only gave me one actual person.
I can send you the names after. I just think in terms of this out in public, out of respect of the two individuals concerned. It's a difficult one. I think that third one actually has probably been the more powerful influence, because I don't know that if you'd asked me that question before, I don't know that I would have been able to tell you what was really important. I was just kind of bumbling away like, yeah, this is good, like this is that. I wasn't consciously aware of my values. I wasn't consciously aware of my beliefs. They were obviously there, but I wasn't consciously aware of them to know to fight for them until it kind of got that far down the path. So now I know that these are non-negotiables in whatever relationship, friendship, working partnership. These are my values. This is what's important to me. This is not negotiable. And now I stand by that. And I don't know, if I hadn't have had that experience, I would possibly still be floating through. Who knows?
You don't know how much you've equipped me for my second question with that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's a tough one to do. In compiling the questions for you, I asked them of myself, and I wanted to keep it to 3 because this is 45 to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And when you've got the chance off camera to sit there and say, what are my values and beliefs? Where the hell did they come from and who influenced them? Mm-hmm. Coming up with 3's a toughie.
Yeah.
I had Yoda in my list at one point.
Yeah, because you naturally start thinking, don't you, about parents, about certain teachers, certain people who have stepped in and supported you, certain friends. But interesting, when I really then stopped to think about it and think who were those 3 people, I've actually surprised myself in the answer that I've given. But I stand by the answer that I've given. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? That pause for thought is really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it might only be a fleeting moment that someone touches your life, but that interaction opens your eyes. I remember the very first time I heard, is it Gerald Ford that came up with the statement, whether you say you can or you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting back and thinking that one and going, okay, so if I say I can do something, I might be able to, but if I say I can't, I won't.
Yeah.
So that brief exposure to that one soundbite made me go, ooh, and there was an addition to my frame of reference.
Yeah, and that's a quote that I use quite often. It was that I can see the image somebody sent to me on a day that I was competing and said, before you start lining up of all the excuses of why you're not going to do well today, can I just remind you, I want to say it's Trevor Ford, but I don't think it was a Trevor, but and then sent me that image, and it really made me stop and think of, okay, I know I can, I've done the training, I know I can, so let's get in there and do this. And that was the best competition I ever had. So it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, thank you. Are you ready for question number 2?
I am now, yeah.
And as I say, you led into this somewhat. I'm going to read it because I want to get my wording right. Would you agree that we as a society don't do enough to encourage people to understand and shape their frame of reference? And if you do agree, how could we change that? And the cornerstone of this question really, Zoe, whenever we teach about frame of reference in mental health training, we encourage people to think, what is your frame of reference? What are your values and beliefs? Where did they come from? That can be a really epiphanal moment for people, because how often do we stop and go, who am I and where did I come from? So do we do enough as a society to help people realize what their frame of reference is and decide what they want their frame of reference to be? And how could we go about it?
So the short answer is no. I'm assuming you want more. So no, I don't think we do. I strongly believe it's a very, very important part of personal growth in understanding that. I would love to see it covered more at an earlier age in school, in part of their social development classes in school. But I also think there is value in doing it as an adult, when you've had more growth and you've had more experiences and you've had more people shape that reference. And I work with, I've worked with people at the moment. Part of the program that we do is we look and we spend time on your values, your beliefs, your purpose, and your needs, how you meet your needs through people, through what you do to meet those needs, how other people support that. And I work with people that are in their 50s that are saying to me, Zoe, I've never done this. I've never sat down and really thought this through. I wish I had known this years ago. So I think there's value in doing it at a younger age with young people. And I work with teenagers as well, and I've worked through it with teenagers. So I think there's value in doing it then and helping them to understand why this is important, and to be able to reflect back where the experiences they've already had, but also know that that's a tool that they can use for the future. And I think there's also benefit to doing it later on. But I think I don't know that as a society we spend time trying to understand. I think we spend time trying to know, we spend time trying to have the answers, but I don't know that we always really spend that time to really understand what things mean. We like to have the answers. We like to regurgitate information that we have read and not necessarily spent time looking at both sides of the argument or where the evidence base has come from for that argument. We're not our own critical thinker often enough. But I don't think we spend time listening to understand other people's term of reference and why other people feel the way they do. So I think understanding is such a powerful word, isn't it? And I think we could do with a whole lot more of that as a society, rather than needing to know or needing to be right or needing to know more. I think I would love to see. And I challenge myself sometimes. I'm like, oh, okay, how much of that did you really listen understand rather than listen to respond, which is a classic, isn't it, of just taking that time of just sitting and listening and hearing people's points of view and where people are coming from and their own experiences.
I think it's a fascinating area, especially when you start picking it apart and you say, okay, go back to basics. What's the difference between a value and a belief? Value, something, my view of what's right. Beliefs at the end of the day are my opinions. I reckon you're right in that in young years, maybe even pre-teen, shouldn't we as a society help people realize what their emerging values are? And if they're conscious of that, that helps them steer themselves towards a life that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
But I've got it in my head that why can't we have like a frame of reference MOT once a year as adults?
Yeah.
Where are my values now? Where are they going? Is that where I want them to go? And I think the real, if we were to contrast our childhood with modern day society, we could go on a rant about the internet and the downsides of the internet. When we were kids, if you wanted to know something, you had to go to the library, didn't you? You had to look it up in a book, and you had a level of faith that books in libraries contain facts. And now we've got this amazing catalogue of information, but we've got this overriding belief that if it's on the internet, it must be true.
Yes. Our opinions are not facts. The number of times that I sit on, Twitter in particular, and people are stating opinions, but they're stating them as facts, and it's like, that is your opinion based on your perception of the world, your view of reality, but that's not the same for everybody else. And it's okay for two people to have different opinions and different life experience and different perceptions of their own reality. That's their truth. That's your truth. This is their truth. But holding, opinion is not fact. What you believe to be true doesn't necessarily mean it is true. And there's such a big difference for that, isn't there?
There is, but we live in an age also where if we look at media, so often you read a news article that's got opinion laced into it. And I guess unless you're challenging that article, it's easily read as fact.
Yeah.
A societal age, I think, where we need to evolve to a point of challenging what we digest more than we do at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that is the challenge, isn't it? Of when we see certain things, of looking for the opposite opinion of it, or the alternative opinion, and searching to see whether or not it is fact. What's the research behind it? What's the evidence base behind it? It's really difficult because it goes against what most of us would advise with social media, isn't it? Don't follow people that don't inspire you, that aren't positive, etc., etc. But actually, we should follow people with differing points of view, because that's how we get to see things from different perspectives, and how we get to understand and be more open-minded of, okay, what do I believe? Why do I believe that? Is that still true? Or am I now starting to see information that starts to shape that differently? But also letting go of the fact that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to experience something different and see the world differently. It's okay to let go of what you believed a year ago and accept that you've seen things differently, and now you would like to believe something else. That's okay. And I think sometimes people are like fiercely stand behind, don't they, of not wanting to be seen as wrong, but there isn't a right or wrong, because it's just perspective.
Yes, ultimately what we're saying here is you've got a choice to make about your frame of reference. You either learn and allow your frame of reference to grow accordingly, or you decide what your frame of reference you want it to be, and you go hunting for what evidence you can find to validate what you want.
Well, this is the delete, distort, and generalize, isn't it? Of when we have our narrative and we then start to try and push everything through the filter. So we delete, we distort, or we generalize everything that we see in the world until it fits through the filter to match the narrative that we already have, unless we choose to see wider than what is coming through our filter.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, thank you. Okay, my final question on frame of reference, and this one's back on you again.
Okay.
And your own frame of reference. If you could change any part of your own frame of reference as it stands today, which bit would you change, and how would you go about doing that?
Oh, which bit would I change?
It could be you're entirely comfortable with all your values and beliefs, and you have the frame of reference that you feel is just what you want, in which case you could say, I wouldn't. But there might be some aspect where you think, actually, I wish I felt a bit more left or right or up or down in that area.
It's definitely something that I have been working on in terms of my awareness. I think things that have been, I think it's one of the great things in this job of coaching is that you see people all of the time who have very different frames of reference. And I think when you're working with people who have a certain set of beliefs or that hold them back, that are getting in their own way, it's like a constant drip of, oh, do I do this? How, afterwards when you're reflecting on a coaching session of, I do get that constant drip of challenging myself. I am a firm believer that coaches are not perfect, but we are human, but we should also be challenging ourselves to continuously evolve. And like we said, continuous improvement is one of my values anyway. So I want to know that I'm not the same person as I was last year. I want to know that I am pushing myself to change and challenge and be able to grow. So I think because of the work that I do have that constant challenge in looking at, okay, where might I do that, and challenge some of the things that I have done in the past or things that I have believed in the past, and challenge myself to be more open-minded. And I think this has probably been the biggest change for me coming out of an organisation like the police. When I was 18 when I started, so it's quite an influential time of life, isn't it? Of those first kind of years of adulthood, of being in that culture where you are not fed, that's the wrong word, but you experience very similar experiences repeatedly that do help, they do shape it. And I think when I came out of that environment and into this world, it was a real challenge for me to start to look with the wider and challenge the filter that I had before. And it was shaped by my experiences, but I'm also now in a position where I can get to hear and understand other people's experiences from the other side. And I think that is about learning and understanding. And I think it is about listening and hearing. And I guess for the one thing I would like to be able to do more of is to really, really listen and understand. So it's when you're in coach state in a coaching session, you totally tune into it. And I would love to be able to do more of that outside of that coaching environment, of just putting my own thoughts, opinions, beliefs to one side and really hearing people as you do when you're in a coach state. And I think that's it's a different environment, isn't it? Which then shapes it's a shape of the reference, isn't it? Of when you're in a different environment, you kind of slip back into different. It's a different environment to step into, isn't it? The coach state is very much a sit down, take a moment, ground, and really tune in to read the person that you're with, and look at the body language and interpret what's being said, what's not being said, the emotions, and reading and helping to support that person. And I would love to be able to do that more day to day with people, because you just get caught up in everything else that's going on, don't you? And I think I know that I would grow as a person if I really tuned into people and really listened to understand people in my world more, and people not in my world.
But I'm going to turn that back on you now, because I think what you've rightly said is we've got this frame of reference. It's a very dynamic beast, and your frame of reference as a human being might be somewhat different to your frame of reference in a work environment.
Yes.
So in my work environment, I am anal about getting stuff done on time. If I've got a deadline, it gets met automatically. At home, I'm an absolute slob, forever driving my other half up the wall that I haven't got jobs done.
Yeah.
So what is it in your work frame of reference? What value or belief is there that's slightly different in your home frame of reference that makes you not as open a listener?
I think it's the being present and the removal of the other distractions. So preparing for a coaching session, phone is in airplane mode, the door is shut, everything else is switched off, there's no notifications coming through. You're totally in the moment, present with the person that you're with. And I think when you're out, in a normal world, there's other conversations going on, there's other things happening. You might be, I am very aware as I say this, that this is sounding as I'm saying it, these are sounding like excuses. There's no reason for a lot of the time why I can't zone in and be present and listen to that person.
I'm going to suggest to you, Zoe, before we move on, that when you're in work mode, you've got a value there that refuses to allow those distractions in. But when you're in social mode, that value isn't so high, so you'll allow them in more.
I wouldn't disagree with that. And I think also there's an awareness, isn't there, of unsolicited coaching when you're not coaching, and actually not, I think sometimes there's that awareness that if you tune into coaching mode, you then start coaching people who didn't want to be coached. They just wanted to have just a little conversation with you. And so I think it's that balance of not switching on that into that headspace and being, people don't want a coach, they want a friend, and it's a very different conversation, isn't it? But I think anybody in this world has, we've slipped into the unsolicited advice and coaching more. It happens, doesn't it? But I absolutely agree with what you just said there. It's a really, really good point.
Agree, though. I remember must be about 18 years ago, I did trainer training on a motivational goal setting program. And for about the next week, every time my partner said something, I say, why do you think you said that? And she just goes, get out of that mode. Be Kev. It's easy to do, isn't it? Blur between the two.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've always said that I would say my parenting style is very much coach. It's that coaching approach, and with my son being older now, he will replay stuff back to me. Like I will say something, he's oh, it's really you really annoy me when you do that. And he's like, I don't make you feel. You choose how you to respond to things. I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. And you think, oh my god, do I do that? Have I become that person?
You've got an 18-year-old mirror.
I know. And he'll come in, and his favorite expression is a mindset thing. Just choose to feel something different. That's his favorite response to anything. It's not at all annoying.
Let's do. Okay, so look, final two questions. I want to switch over to unconscious bias. Again, just for the benefit of anybody tuning in that isn't aware of the phrases, grabbed a lot of headlines over the last year, particularly with the amount of things being said and done around the world around racial injustice. What is unconscious bias? It's a model that suggests that we've all got some social stereotypes deep down in our subconscious mind, and because we've got those, we favor one group over another. First question for you on unconscious bias. Do you think they truly are unconscious biases, Zoe? Are they right down there in a part of our mind that we can't tap into? Or are they in this dark, dank corner at the back of our mind that we could get into? And if it's the latter, how could we go about finding them?
My gut response is it's the latter. And I think for me, it's a lot of it is about experience and integration and spending time with people who will challenge their experiences, their approach, their perception of their reality will help you to see. And it's not even necessarily about changing your own perception. I think it's about the awareness of different perceptions and different realities. And so I think my gut response to it as an answer is about integration. It's about spending time with people. There's a great video which I quite often share on YouTube on unconscious bias. It's probably it's definitely my favorite one on it, in that it's just got lots of messages all the way through. And one of the things that she talks about it's a TED talk. I'll put the link in so that people can watch it. But one of the things that she talks about is how we tend to mentor and support people who are like us. So you hear people say, don't you, oh, they spot somebody, a younger version of themselves that they have that connection with, that they want to be able to support. And her challenge was, go and mentor somebody who is not like you, who doesn't look like you, who doesn't think like you, who doesn't behave like you, who thinks, who has a completely different approach to life to you. Go and mentor and connect with that person, because you will learn from them as much as you can help and support. You will learn, that cross of information will be two-way. And I think that's such a great way of doing it. I think we are very good at helping and supporting people who look and behave like us. It's that birds of a feather. It's part of identity, isn't it? We look for people who we can relate to. But I think there's just so much to learn in finding common themes with other people who aren't like that. And ultimately we're all human, aren't we? There's lots of similarities. And I think this was, something that came up on a previous episode of, we all feel very different, but we're all actually very similar. And I think sometimes it's just about breaking that down and seeing the person behind the stereotype, or seeing the individual and learning about that individual behind the group that we have grouped them into. I think it's very easy to group and pigeonhole, and it's something that I've always felt really strongly against. I've always felt the minute I felt that somebody's trying to group me into something, the rebellious part of me kicks in to be almost like, don't pigeonhole me, don't group me in, don't feel like you've got me all worked out in a 5-minute conversation, because you can't work an individual out in a 5-minute conversation. So I think it's here rather than completely buried, because I think most people are aware of it, because they get quite defensive when they get questioned and challenged. And if you weren't aware of it, you would be completely naive. But I also do think naivety and ignorance plays a part too, because people don't learn what they don't want to learn. They don't see what they don't want to see. They don't. Again, it's that filter, isn't it? They will delete and distort if it doesn't fit the narrative that they hold. But if we want to see it and we want to learn and we want to understand, the information is all there. There's the people there to meet and get to know and see and question our own, their own perceptions. And it is. So I think it is. Yeah, I think it's there rather than. But I think some of it is a willing ignorance, and some of it is naivety.
It fascinates me. My guess would be there's a bit of both. It fascinates me where it comes from, how it gets formed, how a bias that you aren't even aware of right now became a part of your frame of reference. I was in a meeting last year before, talking to the guy sat next to me, and I can't remember how it come up in conversation, but he said that his dad was born in a little village in rural England, with one ethnic minority in the entire village. Therefore, he's racist. And I grew up in a little village in rural England, where Stephen Walcott was the only black kid in our school. and to me, you know, what the hell has color of skin got to do with anything? How does that define you as a person? We probably watch the same kind of television, which, let's face it, back in the 70s wasn't the most politically correct television. We probably had the same kind of media influences. So how can you end up with two people with a similar upbringing, yet polar opposite views down there?
Mm.
And of course, that's something we're never going to pick apart and understand for an individual. The beauty, I think, in exploring the subject of unconscious bias. Have you seen Project Implicit, the Harvard University project on the subject?
No, I don't know that I have.
It's really fascinating to look at, because if you go to their website, and I'll send you the link if you want to put it in, you can have a go at their implicit association tests.
Okay.
So you can pick two groups and say, okay, let me do this test and see if the test suggests I favor one over the other. And I've done quite a few of those. And at the end of it, you have a fundamental answer, which is, if you don't agree with a response, is the test wrong? Or is it a really unconscious bias? Is this your wake up moment?
Yeah.
And there's been I've had to look at it and go, bloody hell, maybe that bias is there then.
Yeah. Yeah.
An area, which leads very nicely onto the last question, Zoe.
Okay.
So, the last one, if one of the people tuning in became aware of an unconscious bias they had, what tips would you give them in how to do the right thing when they're in a situation where they're aware they've got an unconscious bias that would naturally lead them down another route?
I think there's a real nervousness, isn't there, at the moment, about asking the right questions in the right way. And I think there's, again, it's that understanding of showing that you're coming from a place of wanting to learn, of wanting to understand. And I think it's that openness of asking questions. And I've over the last sort of 18 months really challenged some of the things that I have said and how I've responded to things. And I know, hand on my heart, I've come from a place of good intention, but the way that it's translated and the way that it has, the way that it was wrong. There's no way. What I've done, if I had to reflect on it, and I actually had a conversation with somebody and said, I have to hold my hands up. I didn't acknowledge that was, again, your perception of reality. I tried to change your frame of reference by trying to get you to look at your experience in different ways. And I think there is an advantage to do that. But I think what I had done was I'd overstepped the mark in allowing that individual to say that was their experience and how they felt about that experience before I jumped straight in with, oh, what else could it have been? And how else might it have been? If you were somebody else, how might you have perceived this situation? And I didn't give that person the respect to acknowledge how they felt, because that was their experience. And I think for me, that was a real eye-opener for me. I came at that from a good intention, but I was wrong. That was not the right thing for me to do, and apologized. And I think that helped me to see that actually we do all have unconscious biases. We also have conscious biases, but I think it's that openness, isn't it? That willing to learn. I love the phrase, the childlike curiosity of just forgetting not forgetting because you can't forget, but trying to put aside what you think you know, of trying to put aside your own experiences. It's the mindfulness, isn't it, of letting go of the need to be right and the need to know, and forgetting what you believe to be true and your own past experiences, of letting go of that, being willing to see past of your own frame of reference and looking at other people's perceptions of reality. And that's being able to see other people's internal frames and being able to understand and respect and acknowledge that. And I think when I did my NLP course, he asked us on one of the mornings, I remember it being really early because I was like, this is too big a question for this early in the morning. Can we come back to this later? And the question he asked us was, if you weren't you, knowing what you know and having experienced what you've experienced, how might this training day be different for you? And I was like, if I'm not me, then what? And he's like, if you weren't you, with all of your experiences and all your knowledge, and you being you, looking at the world as you look at it, how might today be different for you? And I was like, mind blown. And it was 8:30 in the morning. I was like, okay, how do I do that? How do I not be me knowing what I know? Because that's the things we talk about, isn't it? Is our experiences shape who we are. They shape who we are, how we see the world. How do you let that go? And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? Of, are you willing? Are you open to letting go what you believe to be true, being open to changing your opinion, and being open to learning and understanding things differently? And I think the fact that they even asked the question is a great step in the right direction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Rather that defensiveness of it's not that's not how it is in my experience.
Does not compute.
Computer says no.
I think there are two pathways on this as well. So anyone interested in unconscious bias, by all means, do have a look at somewhere like Project Implicit, reliable information, because there are some well-declared biases. Zoe, you were describing one just now, where there's an affirmation bias. You and I are similar to each other, so I'm naturally going to choose you over someone else. And I think there's something we can do there in terms of, if we're aware that we can act with that bias, putting some checks and balances in place. So I don't recruit staff anymore. We're Big Dog, Little Dog. We advertise ourselves as the only company that's never going to recruit, because then what would we call ourselves? But when I used to recruit, I'd always sleep on it and then look at it more objectively the next day. So I think there are some practical little bits we can do around some specific bias. But are you aware of the riddle about the man and his son going out in the car and having the crash?
Yes.
That's an amazing example of unconscious bias. Not least because there was research done on that, looking at psychology students and how many of them got it, and children, 7 to 17-year-olds, how many of them got it. And in both cases, over 80% didn't get the right answer. And just as a bit of a spoiler for anybody that's now going to Google this, the correct answer is it was his mum. Self-declared, the success rate was only in the 20-odd%. So that does suggest that as a society, in our upbringing, you know, we do have these biases going on, and we've got loads of them going on. You could never define all the biases that you've got. So I think we do have an open question there about what checks and balances can we put in place there.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's when you get caught out, isn't it? And you're like, oh, I got that wrong. I had somebody complaining about a boss, and the behavior that they were describing, and I I was listening, and I said, well, how long has he been your boss? It's a she. And I was like, oh, note to self. Do not make assumptions based on, what, again, and there's so much to unpick in that, because there's the stereotypes of it being masculine type behavior, masculine energy behavior, the fact that it was a boss, so therefore it was, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was surprised myself of that had slipped through the net, so to speak, because normally in terms of females and leadership, I would have said, oh, no, there's no bias there, but clearly there is. So it's really interesting. I mean, there's a comment in the chat there about addressing people's wants rather than telling them what they need until you have their permission to have that conversation with them, but also talking about how when we do integrate and interact with people who we perceive as different from us, actually quite often there's values that are golden threads between that run through all of us as humans. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? There might be different beliefs and cultures and ways of life and different ways of thinking, but there are lots of golden threads in terms of values that we do share. So
yeah, and I think the big takeaway from all 5 of these questions is the role that increasing our knowledge can have in influencing our beliefs.
Yeah, I may be speaking out of turn here, but I think ignorance is not something people can hide behind. I don't think we've got so much information available to us. You could be in a tiny village in the middle of rural England, but that doesn't mean that you don't have information available to you, that if you could access that. But I think, again, if you are in that position, the filter of the media and the filter of the things that you are likely to follow, the people or pages or media content that you're likely to follow is likely to be in line with your existing narrative and not necessarily one that challenges it. So, but I think ignorance is a difficult one, because the world is, the world is so diverse, and I think it's seeing the value in spending time with people who have so much to offer that helps to share, helps to grow your world and helps you to shape your experience in this life. And I think, personal opinion, I think there's a big loss if you don't do that.
Yeah. Well, you and I both work for an organisation that says ignorance is no defence of the law. But of course, we're then on that dilemma, and I didn't come on here to demonise the internet, honestly, but we have a platform where if you want a belief, you can find evidence to back that belief up. And you are heard now, where you might have been the angry person in the village pub 20 years ago, giving your rant, and everyone rolled their eyes and went, "It's Zoe, she's had a drink." Now the whole world can hear you.
And that's the thing, isn't it, is you can put your opinion on internet as written in a way that makes it sound like a fact, and there will be lots of people who will gravitate towards that, and it snowballs really, really quickly. So that's the challenge, isn't it, of the information is available to us, but we still need to be that critical thinker in challenging what we're taking in and making sure that we are questioning and challenging it before we allow it to slip through.
And most of all, checking source data. I think where you don't have to now, you can just believe what you read. I mentioned this in a webinar a few weeks ago, but about 15 years ago, I trended on Twitter and ended up on the NBC front page of their news website, because as a joke to a couple of friends, I found a website where you could enter in someone's name and it created a false web page saying they'd died. So I created that around a certain pop singer that we're all fans of. It created this page. I put it in a forum expecting 5 or 6 people to see it. It was in the top 5 trending tweets the next morning on the internet. And I know that there in Canada, a teacher was using the story as a way of teaching children about false news.
Well, you even got to look at the fact that anybody can change Wikipedia, can't they?
Absolutely. Which a lot of people assume is Wikipedia.
It's making sure it's a legitimate source, but also, who is the source and what's their bias?
Why did they publish that article?
Absolutely. Who's paid for them to do that research and publish that article? Such a big topic, isn't it? It's such a great topic, though, and I think it's something that we can all learn from.
I've often wondered if newspapers should be required to have, I don't know, color coding on, this is a news article, this is an opinion piece, and just spell it out for people. You shouldn't have to, if people were critically thinking about what we're digesting. But I think too often we, and I include myself in that, we see enough information to go, I know it now, and we move on. And we need to be more evolved human beings than that.
Definitely. And it is that, just making sure you're looking at the whole picture and not just the one piece that makes sense to you or looks familiar. You got to do the whole jigsaw piece, haven't you? Not just
find the bit that you wanted to find.
And go, I know what picture it is. I've got a piece, so it's this is what it is, because you do need the whole picture. So amazing. What a fantastic conversation.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, Zoe.
No, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you to Adrian, sending his best from Melksham. So that was his comments I just read out there. So it's always nice to hear what other people are thinking as they're listening and watching in. So thank you so much. We will put the links for Big Dog Little Dog into each platform, so you can see and you can contact Kevin if you want to find out a little bit more about his training and programs. Please do like, share, subscribe, all of the usual stuff. We'll put this out across all of the platforms so people can watch and listen back. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time. Thank you to those of you who have joined us. And if you are listening back, please do feel free to continue to comment and share. I do keep my eye on them and I do respond. So thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin, for your time. And everybody have a fantastic day.